Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and today we're going to be taking a look at the ASRock Fatal1ty B450 Gaming ITX AC Mini ITX Motherboard. Coming up after this. Okay, so here it is. This is the Fatal1ty board by ASRock, the B450 chipset gaming Mini ITX AC motherboard. Now this is probably the cheapest of all of the Mini ITX motherboards that I could find currently on Amazon, and that is of the, just double checking, the 16th of May 2019. So if you're looking for something for the AM4 chipset on a Mini ITX, this is pretty much the best bang per buck. So let's take it out of the box and take a look and see what we actually get for our money and check out some of the specs. Now actually, just before we do that, let's go through some of the highlights actually on the back of the box. So one of the highlights is the Polychrome RGB, so that's ASRock's implementation of RGB on this motherboard. Now it supports both the traditional 12-volt RGB and also the newer 5-volt addressable RGB. So if you're maybe putting this into a case that already has some form of addressable or regular RGB in it, this is going to be right up your street. And maybe you've got an older case or an older box, whatever it is you're putting it into, which runs on the older RGB standards, you're still catered for with the newer RGB standards should you wish to upgrade your chassis. Now for me this is perfect. Currently this is going to be going into the InWin A1 case, and hopefully in the maybe near future, hopefully upgrade into the InWin A1 Plus, which is the addressable RGB version. So keep tuned to see if that actually happens or not. Another great feature, or other great features in fact, is the connectivity. So we've got Intel connectivity for both our Wi-Fi and also for the LAN. So we've got Gigabit LAN and we've also got dual band Wi-Fi, and also thrown in we've got some Bluetooth in there as well. So if you're going to be using this as some kind of media center, then you can actually use the Bluetooth to your advantage. Maybe use a Bluetooth controller to give you that little bit of extra distance, or maybe you want to use a set of Bluetooth headphones such as the AirPods, or maybe something like the Mixer E9 headphones, which I reviewed, which you can check out up here. Those would be perfect for a media center setup. Other features, connectivity wise, you've got dual USB 3.1 Gen 2, so that's 10 gigabits per second. We've got one Type C and we've got one Type A, so nice fast USB. There's also other USB ports on there, we'll go into those in a little bit. Also we've got Ultra M.2, so that's 32 gigabits per second, and that's PCIe Gen 3 times 4. And also supports actually SATA 3 at the same time. Well, not at the same time, but you know what I mean. The same slot supports both standards. So let's get out of the box and take a look and see what it actually looks like. So in the box we get the motherboard, which actually is really, really tiny. You get the ASRock CD with the Fatal1ty branding. Also, just about see that in there, maybe. There is a chrome ASRock badge which you can put on the front of your PC case, so if you're proud to be an ASRock owner, you can say it's ASRock powered. Right, we get the B450 Fatal1ty motherboard software setup guide. So this is a separate manual which is purely based on how to set up all the software that comes on the DVD, and also how to tailor it for things like fan speeds, overclocking, all that kind of stuff. That can be really useful. You also get a Fatal1ty by ASRock postcard, so not entirely sure why you'd want that, but hey, maybe if you're going to Computex this year, send your friends one of these, who knows. Next up you've got the a lot thicker, this is your installation guide and owner's manual, quick installation guide. So this gives you all the information about where the pinouts go, how to configure the BIOS and all those kinds of things. So pretty decent setup from there. All the bases are covered, you shouldn't really have any questions, but obviously if you do have any questions, you can either ask them here at the section below, or alternatively just go to www.asrock.com and you can get your questions answered there by their support section. So even more things in the box, we have a couple of SATA connections, SATA 3, 6 gigabit per second, and just trying to see, yeah, there's one right angled connector and one traditional straight connector. There is the M.2 drive screw, mounting screw, in a big bag. Don't lose that, very important. Very difficult to get hold of replacements, surprisingly. Here we have the I/O shield. Now this is not quite the plainest of chrome installation shields, so you've got a little bit of colour there in the Fatality branding, and actually on the back it does give you the information of what each port is and how to connect it, etc. So DisplayPort, HDMI, all those kinds of things. So that's kind of nice, a little bit of a step up from the norm. And last but not least, the coolest thing, the antenna for the Wi-Fi and also for the Bluetooth. So dual antennas, dual band, really nice. So that's all the accessories out of the box. So let's take a look at the board itself. Now you can see this board is absolutely tiny and it's not much bigger than my outstretched hand. So you can get some idea of what the size is going to be like. It is very, very small. Actually, this is a 2-inch paintbrush. You get the idea. It isn't very big at all, which is the whole thing with Mini ITX. Now obviously with it being Mini ITX, there is the downside of also this is going to cost considerably more than its regular ATX or even micro ATX counterparts. Now a very similar model to this in the ATX format, you'd be looking about £70 to £80. The micro ATX version slightly less, about £10 to £15 less. This board at the moment on Amazon retails around about £100. It does fluctuate a little bit, but realistically you're looking at about £100. But having said that, for the features and what it has, the next best alternative in my mind is the ROG Strix board, which again is considerably more expensive at somewhere between £150 and £160. So obviously the Strix board does have certain features which make it a little bit better, but this is actually fantastic value for money. Okay, so we talked about the price. Let's take a look around the board and see what we actually get. Now, starting off, we'll go to the back of the board. On the back of the board is not very exciting. You can see some of the chips on the back for your VRM around the side there, and also at the top for the CPU. You've also got on the back the M.2 slot there, which is the PCIe Gen 3 ×4, or also the SATA 3 6 gigabit per second, depending on what you want to mount in there. Don't actually look as if you can move the screws very much, so you're going to be limited to a 2280 type connection on there, or sized M.2 board. Bear that in mind if you're thinking of upgrading. On the actual I/O itself, now on the I/O you've got a Fatality mouse port, so in that you can actually control things like the mouse polling rate, so 2 USB 2.0s. You've got a combination keyboard and mouse port, PS2 port, if you want to go a little bit old school. Some gamers do still prefer using PS2. Not entirely sure why, but they do. So PS2 port is there if you need it. Now next to that you've got a display port, next to that a HDMI port, and moving on down you've got the USB 3.1, Type A and Type C. Now actually going back to the display ports and the HDMI port, obviously those are only going to come into play if you're using a APU on this, or a chip that has onboard graphics. If you're using something like a Ryzen 7 1700 for instance, you would need to use a separate graphics card to get any display output. Those wouldn't be of any use to you. But if you're using something like which I'm planning to use, which is like a Ryzen 3 2200G, that's going to be perfect, so you can have your DisplayPort or your HDMI output to power your monitor without having to have a separate graphics card. Moving on, so you've got the Gigabit Ethernet LAN, next to that a pair of USB 3.0 ports. Next we've got our audio. Now the audio actually on this is something pretty special. This is actually made by Nichicon Audio. So we're using Nichicon audio capacitors, and some of the reviewers that I've seen this board on already have actually said that the audio on this, the quality is actually fantastic, and the signal to noise ratios, all those kinds of things, everything which is important to those people that are maybe really into their audio, this ticks most of the boxes and is very close to having a separate dedicated audio device externally. So very, very good audio. Again, if you're using this in some kind of media center setup, this is going to be fantastic for you, being that it supports Dolby 7.1 surround sound, and also you've got things like your optical out and your various channels. So you've got the earphone, the line, microphone, and then you've got your other two ports there, which are generally for your subwoofer and your extra surround sound channels. So very, very good audio indeed. Moving further on down, this is the jacks for the antenna. So the antennas just screw on there. So that again is for your Intel based AC Wi-Fi and also the Bluetooth connectivity. Now for me, that is the one thing, well, one of the things which I think could have been different on this board. For me personally, I would have preferred to seen the Wi-Fi connectivity and the Bluetooth connectivity being relocated to the top of the board. If you're making a system, a Mini ITX system, there's a possibility that you're going to be having the board flat in a small desktop system, or alternatively you're going to have it upright. It's unlikely you're going to be having it upside down. So if you have it upside down, the aerials could face up with no obstruction, they'll be absolutely fine. But if you've got the system in an upright orientation like this, then the aerials are going to be upright and they're going to be blocking some of your other ports without being in the way. For me, it's a niggle, but it's a very annoying thing. If that was relocated to the top, you could have your aerials poking out the top and they wouldn't obstruct any of the other I/O whatsoever. Again, it's a little bit nitpicky, but I think it is probably a good idea to have that moved to the top. Let me know what you think in the comments, it'd be interesting to know. Okay, anyway, there's that over with. So moving on down, we've got a couple of gold caps there that I believe is for the audio still. My eyesight isn't the greatest, but I'm pretty sure that's part of the Chicon audio range. They're capacitors. You've also got the Realtek audio chip just underneath that as well. Next to that, there's a 4-pin connector for speakers, and also in that little tight area there, you've also got your HD audio front panel connection. And that is another one of my little criticisms of this board, if there are any. And they actually, most of my criticisms actually, funny enough, tend to be all in this area. So the Wi-Fi antennas, okay, we've touched on that. That's a kind of a mute point maybe. But the other thing is the HD audio connector being there where it's upraised. Now, I guess obviously because you've got your PCI Express port at the very bottom, there's not a lot you can do about that. That pretty much has to stay there because of the form factor. But maybe those connectors could have been moved slightly lower down. Otherwise, you have to have a pretty ugly HD audio cable connection sticking up over your graphics card if you're going to be using one, or tucked in around there where there's already quite a busy area. Not only that, then you've also got the speaker if you wanted to connect it, which is another, again, is another ugly connector. And to make things worse, they've gone and put the BIOS battery, stuck it on the side of there, and they've used this horrible, ghastly red and black cabling, which surely they could have just used 2 black cables rather than a red and black. Isn't that big a deal? Surely they could have done that. That sticks out like a sore thumb to me. Now, being that quite a lot of cases and motherboards are designed to be showpieces, we take a lot of time and effort to try and choose our parts to make it all fit together nicely and all look the part. But to have something like that stuck right in the middle of the motherboard area, to me is just like, why? Why do it? A little black cable in there would be fine. But anyway, let's move on. Okay, so being as we're down in this bottom corner, let's carry on round. So we've got our steel slot PCI Express 16 slot. Now, obviously, this is PCI Express times 16. If you're using a Ryzen 3, 5 or 7 with the right amount of PCI lanes. If you're using a Vega-based APU, then this is going to default down to a times 8 slot, which possibly isn't a massive deal breaker for most. It's part and parcel of how it all works, but just be aware that you will get reduced bandwidth on this slot if you're using a Vega-based APU, even if that APU is disabled. So moving further around, nice and easy to get to, the CMOS reset in the corner here. Next to that, you've got a your front panel connector or your I/O connector. So that's all in that area there. Next to that is the trusted platform module connection. I think on this they call it an LPC, but it's essentially the same thing. 4 SATA connections. Again, that's actually not in too bad a positioning. Personally, I would have probably have liked those to be in the right angle connectors, but it's a minor difference. At least they're there. At least you've got 4 of them. Some boards only have 2, so it's good to see. Moving up slightly further, we've got our USB 2.0 header and our USB 3.0 header. So again, that's quite convenient having both of those in the same place, being as it's all part of that front panel system, so nice and easy to route through. Next to that, we've got our 24-pin power connector, a fan connector here. Actually, I missed one out. There's a fan connector at the bottom there. Now, actually, both of these fan connectors or chassis fan connectors are adaptable, so they can be set for either a water pump or a chassis fan. So complete flexibility in the BIOS for the ASRock system there. You can add whatever you want and it will take some pretty high amperage equipment as well. The 2 things actually I missed out there, which are quite massive. The RAM slots, so this supports up to 32 gigs of RAM. and memory speed supported up to 3466 megahertz if you can get the RAM that push it that far. Which, actually saying that, with the new Ryzen 3000 series coming out, hopefully that kind of RAM is going to be relatively commonplace very soon. Watch this space. Further on round, we've got the CPU fan connector at the top there. Next to that is all the CPU fan stuff. So we've got the RGB headers as well. So if you're using obviously this is an AM4 chip based board. If you're using a modern Ryzen chip, there's a strong possibility that the cooler that you've had with your chip has an RGB ring on it, maybe an RGB addressable ring, or maybe you've got the one which has got the actual USB connector as well. So this has a USB header, a single slot USB header. You've got the addressable RGB header and your regular 12 volt RGB header and the fan header all in this area, all nicely put together. So for cable management, it's going to make that nice and easy, so you can route all your cables into this one direction. Moving around again, the only other things I've mentioned, I suppose, are the heat sinks. We've got heat sinks over the B450 chipset here at the bottom, and also in the VRM area here. And actually, these coolers, actually, I'm not sure what they're made of. Obviously, they're a metal of some sort, but they actually, even in the ambient temperature in this room, if you touch them, they actually feel colder than anything else that I touch. So that's probably a good thing. I'm not a scientist, but the fact that they're cold to the touch in an ambient temperature seems to me like a winning formula. Anyway, that pretty much wraps up the tour of this board and some of the features. There may have been some things I've missed out. If there are, then you can look them up at the ASRock website, www.asrock.com, or you feel free to ask me questions in the comments section below. Now, like I said, this is going to be going into a build very soon. If you watched my review of the InWin A1 case, which you can see up here, this is what this is going into. So we're going to put a Ryzen 3 2200G in there, put 16 gigs of RAM, and we're going to build up a nice little system all in the Mini ITX form factor. So again, if you want to see how that goes, don't forget to subscribe, click on the chime icon, all that kind of good stuff. But in the meantime, I've been Mike. This is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and this has been the ASRock B450 Fatal1ty ITX/AC. Thanks for watching.